let's talk about the crazy Elon Musk Twitter saga.
I wish I knew how to quit you. Why don't you?
Now having a whistleblower element.
So the man at the center of this story is Peter Zatko, better known in hacking and cybersecurity circles by his nickname Mudge. Growing up in the Northeast almost 5 decades ago, he dove into the world of computers at an early age, eventually spending his days at a computer lab with MIT hackers in college, then moving on to work for a firm helping to build the early internet, but his career really began in 1996, because that is when he joined an underground hacker collective known as Loft. It's often called the first of its kind in the US. But also, when I say hackers, it's not like bad. They actually got a lot of praise for providing early warnings about security flaws in programs. So by making flaws public, they left companies vulnerable to attack. So Microsoft's like, hey, why don't you actually just give us advance notice so we can patch issues before you publish them? Which is actually how they originally developed the model for coordinated disclosure used by most researchers today. Right, but all of that is to say, that's why people say Mudge is credible. He testified to Congress in 1988, he's advised big banks and software companies, he's even worked for DARPA, then going on to join another group that coined the term hacktivism, using hacking to promote human rights by increasing transparency and fighting surveillance. Right, so we have all of that background, and then we jump to the summer of 2020. Twitter gets humiliated by a 17-year-old American kid who hacks the accounts of numerous celebrities, including Kim Kardashian, Kanye West, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, and Barack Obama. So the company's CEO at the time, Jack Dorsey, understandably wants to tighten up security, with him eventually finding Mudge, with a source telling the Washington Post, Jack loves hackers and Mudge is a hacker legend. And so Mudge comes on board as the new head of security, and according to him, conducts a thorough review of Twitter, hiring top engineers and pushing for more transparency and accountability, with him remaining in that role until January of this year when he was fired. But then last month, he filed a complaint with the SEC and multiple law enforcement agencies alleging wrongdoing at Twitter. And now that filing has been published, with it accusing the company of having extreme, egregious deficiencies in its spam and hacking defenses dating all the way back to 2011. So let's go through what's been alleged and how explosive all of this actually is. First up, Mudge says that Twitter had extremely lax security practices, giving thousands of employees amounting to roughly half the company's workforce access to some of its critical controls.
There's an analogy of an airplane. So you get on an airplane and every passenger and the attendant crew all have access to the cockpit, to the controls. You know, that's entirely unnecessary. It might be easy, but it's too easy to accidentally or intentionally turn an engine off.
And one of the reasons this worried him so much was that after January 6th, as Twitter executives were debating whether to censor Donald Trump, he feared that employees who sympathize with the insurrectionists might try to tamper with the platform. So he investigates how vulnerable it is, saying he discovered no logging of who went into the production environment, basically the place where engineers can make changes to the software, and adding that Twitter also lacked the ability to hold workers accountable for information security lapses because it has little control or visibility into employees' individual work computers. Also citing internal cybersecurity reports estimating that 4 in 10 devices do not meet basic security standards. Then among the other allegations, Mudge says that Twitter has an anonymously high rate of security incidents, approximately 1 per week, serious enough to require disclosure to government agencies. Yet despite this, he claims that the company hasn't been complying with a more than decade-long agreement with the FTC to clean up its security problems. Which, I mean, that alone is especially huge, because if Twitter is found to have violated its legal obligations, it could potentially face billions of dollars in fines. Then, in a bombshell revelation, Mudge claims that right before his firing, the US government provided Twitter with specific evidence that at least one of its employees was working for another government's intelligence service, or to translate, there may be a foreign spy inside Twitter. And this comes just a couple weeks after a former company manager was convicted of spying for Saudi Arabia. And then finally, for what we're talking about, Mudge's disclosure includes several claims that Twitter lied to its shareholders, to regulators, and to Elon Musk. First, with the shareholders, after Jack Dorsey stepped down last year, Parag Agrawal took over as CEO, allegedly being far less transparent than his predecessor, allegedly discouraging Mudge from giving a full accounting of Twitter's security problems to the board of directors, with executives allegedly ordering Mudge to give an oral report of his findings to the board rather than a detailed written account, telling him to knowingly present cherry-picked and misrepresented data to create a false perception of progress on urgent cybersecurity issues, and going behind his back to have a third-party consulting firm's report scrubbed to hide the true extent of the company's problems. Secondly here, Mudge alleges that Twitter executives put user growth before reducing spam, claiming that they stood to win individual bonuses of as much as $10 million tied to increases in daily users. And third, Mudge alleges that Twitter has lied about the extent of bots and spam on its platform to Elon Musk, and saying there that the company has no incentive to accurately count the number of such accounts and, if anything, is incentivized to undercount them. Though he did not provide hard evidence that this was happening, and Twitter denies it. Which is why, as we've talked about, Musk and Twitter are going to court in October over the billionaire's attempt to back out of his purchase of the company due to precisely this issue. So these new allegations could significantly hurt Twitter's defense in this case. It's just going to depend on how much real evidence is provided and what can be demonstrated. And so now, unsurprisingly, you have lawyers for Musk issuing subpoenas for both Mudge and Jack Dorsey to appear at the trial. There's also this business between Mudge and Twitter over his termination, which he believes was in retaliation for him trying to bring awareness to the security issues. And as far as Twitter's response to all of this, you have a spokesperson claiming that Mudge was fired for ineffective leadership and poor performance, and adding, "What we've seen so far is a false narrative about Twitter and our privacy and data security practices that is riddled with inconsistencies and inaccuracies and lacks important context," as well as responding to some of the more specific claims, saying that it has a range of security measures to prevent employees from accessing sensitive data and that Mudge doesn't understand FTC compliance. But yeah, as of recording, that is where we are with this absolute mess of a story. And I mean, that's without covering everything, which I'll link down below to reports.